Zecharia Sitchin, best-selling author of The Twelfth Planet. The book is The End of Days, Armageddon and Prophecies of the Return. Chapter 2. And it came to pass. It is highly significant that in its record of Sumer, or Sumerian, civilization, the Bible chose to highlight the space connection incident, the one known as the tale of the Tower of Babel. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they settled there. And they said to one another, Come, let us make bricks and burn them by fire. And the bricks served them as stone, and the bitumen served them as mortar. And they said, Come, let us build a city, and a tower whose head shall reach the heavens. Genesis 11. This is how the Bible recorded the most audacious attempt by Marduk to assert his supremacy by establishing his own city in the heart of Enlil's domains, and moreover to build there his own space facility with its own launch tower. The place is named in the Bible, Babel or Babylon in English. This biblical tale is remarkable in many ways. It records, first of all, the settlement of the Tigris-Euphrates plain after the deluge, after the soil had dried up enough to permit resettlement. It correctly names the new land Shinar, the Hebrew name for Sumer. It provides the important clue from the mountainous region to the east, the settlers had come. It recognizes that it was there that man's first urban civilization began, the building of cities. It correctly notes and explains that in that land where the soil consisted of layers of dried mud and there is no native rock, the people used mud bricks for building, and by hardening the bricks in kilns could use them instead of stone. It also refers to the use of bitumen as mortar in construction. An astounding bit of information, since bitumen, a natural petroleum product, seeped up from the ground in southern Mesopotamia but was totally absent in the land of Israel. The authors of this chapter in Genesis were thus well informed regarding the origins and the key innovations of the Sumerian civilization. They also recognized the significance of the Tower of Babel incident, as in the tales of the creation of Adam and of the deluge. They melded the various Sumerian deities into the plural Elon, or into all-encompassing and supreme Yahweh. But they left in the tale the fact that it took a group of deities to say, Let us come down, and put an end to this rogue effort. Genesis 11:7. Sumerian and later Babylonian records attest to the veracity of the biblical tale and contain many more details, linking the incident to the overall strained relationships between the gods that caused the outbreak of the two pyramid wars after the deluge. The peace on earth arrangements, circa 8650 BCE, left the erstwhile Eden in Enlilite hands. That conformed to the decisions of Anu, Enlil, and even Enki, but was never acquiesced by Marduk-Ra. And so it was that when cities of men began to be allocated in the former Eden to the gods, Marduk raised the issue, what about me? Although Sumer was the heartland of the Enlilite territories, and its cities were Enlilite cult centers, there was one exception in the south of Sumer at the edge of the marshlands. There was Eridu. It was rebuilt after the deluge at the exact same site where Ea, Enki's first settlement on earth, had been. It was Anu's insistence, when the earth was divided among the rival Anunnaki clans, that Enki forever retain Eridu as his own. Circa 3460 BCE, Marduk decided that he could extend his father's privilege to also having his own foothold in the Enlilite heartland. The available texts do not provide the reason why Marduk chose that specific site on the banks of the Euphrates River for his new headquarters, but its location provides a clue, and it was situated between the rebuilt Nippur, the pre-diluvial mission control center, and the rebuilt Sippar, the pre-diluvial space support of the Anunnaki. So what Marduk had in mind could have been a faculty that served both functions. A later map of Babylonian, drawn on a clay tablet, figure 10 in the book, page 21, represents it as a navel of the earth, akin to Nippur's original function title. The name Marduk gave the place Bab-Ili in Akkadian, which meant gateway of the gods, a place from which the gods could ascend and descend, where the appropriate main facility was to be the tower, whose head shall reach the heavens, a launch tower. As in the biblical tale, so it is told in parallel and earlier Mesopotamian versions that this attempt to establish a rogue space faculty came to naught. Though fragmented, the Mesopotamian texts, first translated by George Smith in 1876, make it clear that Marduk's act infuriated Enlil, who in his anger a command poured out for a nighttime attack to destroy the tower. Egyptian records report that a chaotic period that lasted 350 years preceded the start of the pharaonic kingship in Egypt. Circa 3110 BCE, it is the time frame that leads us to the date the Tower of Babel incident to circa 3460 BCE. For the end of that chaotic period marked the return of Marduk Ra to Egypt, the expulsion of Thoth, and the start of the worship of Ra. Frustrated this time, Marduk never gave up his attempts to dominate the official space faculties that served as the bond heaven-earth, the link between Nibiru and Earth, or to set up his own facility. Since in the end Marduk did attain his aims in Babylon, the interesting question is, why did he fail in 3460 BCE? The equally interesting answer is, it was a matter of timing. A well-known text recorded a conversation between Marduk and his father Enki, in which a disheartened Marduk asked his father what he had failed to learn. What he had failed to do was to take into account the fact that the time, then the celestial time, was the age of the bull, the age of Enlil. Among the thousands of inscribed tablets unearthed in the ancient Near East, quite a number provided information regarding the month associated with a particular deity. In a complex calendar begun in Nippur in 3760 BCE, the first month, Nisanu, was the Ezen, E-Z-E-N, which is known as the festival time for Anu, and Enlil, in a leap year with a 13th lunar month, the honor was split between the two. The list of honorees changed as time went by, and as did the composition of the membership of the Supreme Pantheon of 12. The month associations also changed locally, not only in various lands, but sometimes to recognize the city god. We know, for example, that the planet we call Venus was initially associated with Ninma, or Nima, and later on the Ayana Ishtar. Though such changes make difficult the identifications of who was linked celestially to what, some zodiacal associations can be clearly identified from texts or drawings. Enki, called at first Ea, he whose home is water, was clearly associated with the water-bearer Aquarius, and initially, if not permanently, also with the fishes, Pisces. The constellation that was named the twins, Gemini, without doubt was so named in honor of the only known divine twins born on Earth, Nannar, Sin's children, with Utu, Shamash, and Ayana, Ishtar. The feminine constellation of Virgo, the maiden rather than the inaccurate virgin, that, like the planet Venus, was probably named at first in honor of Nima, was renamed Ab.Sin, whose father is Sin, which could be correct only for Ayana Ishtar. The archer or defender, Sagittarius, matched the numerous texts and hymns extolling Ninurta as the divine archer, his father's warrior and defender. Sippar, the city of Utah, or Utu, Shamash, no longer the site of a spaceport after the deluge, was considered in Sumerian times to be the center of law and justice, and the god was deemed, even by later Babylonians, as the chief justice of the land. It is certain that the scales of justice, Libra, represented his constellation. And then there were the nicknames comparing the prowess, strength, or characteristics of a god and an animal held in awe, and Leal's, as text after text reiterated, was the bull. It was depicted on cylinder seals on tablets, dealing with astronomy and in art. Some of the most beautiful art objects discovered in the royal tombs of Ur were bullheads, sculpted in bronze, silver, and gold, adorned with semi-precious stones. Without doubt, the constellation of the bull, Taurus, honored and symbolized Enlil. Its name, God Gud. Anna, meant the bull of heaven, and texts dealing with an actual bull of heaven linked Enlil and his constellation to one of the most unique places on Earth. It was a place that was called the landing place, and it was there that one of the most amazing structures on Earth, including a stone tower that reaches to the heavens, still stands. Many texts from antiquity, including the Hebrew Bible, describe or refer to the unique forest of tall and great cedar trees in Lebanon. In ancient times, it extended for miles, surrounded the unique place, a vast stone platform built by the gods as their first space-related site on Earth. Before their centers and real spaceport were established, it was, Sumerian texts attested, the only structure that had survived the deluge and could thus serve right after the deluge as a base of operations for the Anunnaki. From it, they revived the ravished lands with crops and domesticated animals. The place called the landing place in the Epic of Gilgamesh was the king's destination in search for immortality. We learn from the epic tale that it was there, in the sacred cedar forest, that Enlil kept the god, or Gud. Anna, the bull of heaven, the symbol of Enlil's age of the bull. And what happened then in the sacred forest had a bearing on the course of the affairs of the gods and men. The journey to the cedar forest and its landing place, we learn from the epic tale, began in Uruk, the city that Anu granted as a present to his great-granddaughter Ayana, a name that meant beloved of Anu. Its king early in the 3rd millennium BCE was Gilgamesh. He was no ordinary man, for his mother was the goddess of Ninsun, a member of Enlil's family. That made Gilgamesh not a mere demigod, but one who was 2/3 divine. As he got older and began to contemplate matters of life and death, it occurred to him that being 2/3 divine ought to make a difference. Why should he peer over the wall like an ordinary mortal? He asked his mother. She agreed with him, but explained to him that the apparent immortality of the gods was in reality longevity due to the long orbital period of their planet. To attain such longevity, he had to join the gods on Nibiru, and to do that, he had to go to the place where the rocket ships ascend and descend. Though warned of the journey's hazards, Gilgamesh was determined to go. If I fail, he said, at least I will be remembered as one who had tried. At his mother's insistence on artificial double, Enkidu, meant by Enki maid, was to be his companion and guardian. Their adventures told and retold in the epic 12 tablets, and its many ancient renderings can be followed in our book, The Stairway to Heaven. There were in fact not one, but 2 journeys. One was to the landing place in the cedar forest, and the other to the spaceport in the Sinai Peninsula, where, according to each Egyptian depictions, rocket ships were emplaced in underground silos. In the first journey, circa 2860 BCE, to the cedar forest in Lebanon, the duo were assisted by the god Shamash, the godfather of Gilgamesh, and the going was relatively quick and easy. After they reached the forest, they witnessed during the night the launching of a rocket ship. This is how Gilgamesh described it. The vision that I saw was wholly awesome. The heavens shrieked, the earth boomed. Though daylight was dawning, darkness came. Lightning flashed, a flame shot up. The clouds swelled, it rained death. Then the glow vanished, the fire went out, and all that had fallen was turned to ashes. Awed but undeterred, the next day Gilgamesh and Enkidu discovered the secret entrance that had been used by the Anunnaki, but as soon as they entered it, they were attacked by a robot-like guardian who was armed with death beams and a revolving fire. They managed to destroy the monster and relaxed by a brook, thinking that their way was in the clear, and that their way was clear. But when they ventured deeper into the cedar forest, a new challenger appeared, the bull of heaven. Unfortunately, the sixth tablet of the epic is too damaged for the lines described, the creature and the battle with it to be completely legible. The legible portions do make it clear that the two comrades ran for their lives, pursued by the bull of heaven, all the way back to Uruk. It was there that Enkidu managed to slay it. The text becomes legible where the boastful Gilgamesh, who cut off the bull's thigh, called the craftsmen, the armors, the artisans of Uruk to admire the bull's horns. The text suggests that they were artificially made. Each is cast from 30 minas of lapis. The coating on each is 2 fingers thick. Until another tablet with the illegible lines is discovered, we shall not know for sure whether Enlil's celestial symbol in the cedar forest was a specially selected bull. Decorated and embellished with gold and precious stones, or a robotic creature, an artificial monster. What do we know for certain, or what we do know for certain, is that upon its slaying, Ishtar in her abode set up a whale, W-A-I-L, all the way to Anu in the heavens. The matter was so serious that Anu, Enlil, Enki, and Shamash formed a divine council to judge the comrades. Only Enkidu ended up being punished, and to consider the slaying's consequences. The ambitious Ayana Ishtar had indeed reason to raise a whale. The invincibility of Enlil's age had been pierced, and the age itself was symbolically shortened by the cutting off of the bull's thigh. We know from Egyptian sources, including pictorial depictions in astronomical papyri, that the slaying's symbolism was not lost on Marduk. It was taken to mean that in the heavens, too, the age of Enlil had been cut short. Marduk's attempt to establish an alternative space faculty was not taken lightly by the Enlilites. The evidence suggests that Enlil and Ninurta were preoccupied with establishing their own alternative space facility on the other side of the Earth, in the Americas, near the post-diluvial sources of gold. This absence, together with the Bull of Heaven incident, ushered in a period of instability and confusion in their Mesopotamian heartland, subjecting it to incursions from neighboring lands. People called Goatians, G-U-T-I-A-N-S, G-U-T-I-A-N-S. The Elamites came from the east, Semitic-speaking peoples came from the west, but while the Easterners worshipped the same Enlilite gods as the Sumerians, the Amaru, otherwise known as the Westerners, were different. Along the shores of the Upper Sea, the Mediterranean, in the lands of the Canaanites, the people were beholden to the Enkilite or Enkiite gods of Egypt. Therein lay the seeds, perhaps to this day, of holy wars undertaken in the name of God, except that different peoples had different national gods. It was Ayana who came up with a brilliant idea. It can be described as, if you can't fight them, invite them. One day, as she was roaming the skies in her sky chamber, it happened circa 2360 BCE, she landed in a garden next to a sleeping man who had caught her fancy. She liked the sex, she liked the man. He was a Westerner, speaking a Semitic language. As he wrote later in his memoirs, he knew not who his father was, but knew that his mother was an Entu, a god's priestess, who put him in a reed basket that was carried by the river's flowing waters to a garden tended by Aki, the irrigator, who raised him as a son. The possibility that the strong and handsome man could have been a god's cast-off son was enough for Ayana to recommend to the other gods that the next king of the land should be this Amaru. When they agreed, she granted him the epithet name Sherakin, the old cherished title of Sumerian kings, not stemming from the previous recognized royal Sumerian lineages. He could not ascend the throne in any of the olden capitals, and a brand new city was established to serve as the capital. It was called Agade, Union City. Our textbooks call this King Sargon of Akkad, and his Semitic language, Akkadian. His kingdom, which added northern and northwestern provinces to ancient Sumer, was called Sumer and Akkad. Sargon lost little time in carrying out the mission for which he was selected, to bring the rebel lands under control. Hymns to Iana, henceforth known by the Akkadian name Ishtar, and had her tell Sargon that he would be remembered by the destruction of the rebel land, massacring its people, making its rivers run with blood. Sargon's military expeditions were recorded and glorified in his own royal annals. His achievements were summarized in the Sargon Chronicle thus: Sharrukin, king of Agad, rose to power in the era of Ishtar. He left neither rival nor opponent. He spread his terror, inspiring awe in all the lands. He crossed the sea in the east. He conquered the country of the west in its full extent. The boast implies that the sacred space-related site, the landing place, deep in the country of the west, was captured and held in behalf of Iana Ishtar, but not without opposition. Even texts written in glorification of Sargon state that in his old age all the provinces revolted against him. Counter-annals recording the events as viewed from Marduk's side reveal that Marduk led a punishing counter-offensive. An account of the sacrilege Sargon committed. The great god Marduk became enraged. From east to west he alienated the people from Sargon and punished him with an affliction of being without rest. Sargon's territorial reach, it needs to be noted, included one of the 4 post-diluvial space-related sites, only the landing place in the cedar forest. Sargon was briefly succeeded on the throne of Sumar and Akkad by 2 sons, but his true successor in spirit and deed was a grandson named Naram-Sin. The name meant Sin's favorite, but the annals and the inscriptions concerning his reign and military campaigns show that he was in fact Ishtar's favorite. Texts and depictions record that Ishtar encouraged the king to seek grandeur and greatness by ceaseless conquest and destruction of her enemies, actively assisting him on the battlefields. Depictions of her, which used to show her as an enticing goddess of love, now showed her as a goddess of war, bristling with weapons. It was warfare not without a plan to counter Marduk's ambitions by capturing all the space-related sites in behalf of Iana Ishtar. The list of the cities captured or subdued by Naram-Sin indicate that he not only reached the Mediterranean Sea, assuring control of the landing place, but also turned southward to invade Egypt. Such an incursion into the Enkiite domains was unprecedented, and it could take place. A careful reading of the records reveals because Iana Ishtar had formed an unholy alliance with Nergal, Marduk's brother was espoused Iana's sister. The thrust into Egypt also required entering and crossing the neutral sacred region in the Sinai Peninsula, where the spaceport was located. Another breach of the Olden Peace Treaty. Boastful Naram-Sin gave himself the title King of the 4 Regions. We can hear the protests of Enki. We can read texts that record Marduk's warnings. It was all more than even the Enlilite leadership could condone. A long text known as the Curse of Agad, which tells the story of the Akkadian dynasty, clearly states that its end came about after the frowning of the forehead of Enlil. And so the word of Ekur, E-K-U-R, the decision of the Enlil from his temple in Nippur, was to put an end to it. The word of the Ekur was upon Agad, to be destroyed and wiped off the face of the earth. Naram-Sin end came circa 2260 BCE. Texts from the time report that troops from the territory in the east called Gudium, loyal to Ninurta, were the instrument of divine wrath. Agad was never rebuilt, never resettled. The royal city, indeed, had never been found. The saga of Gilgamesh at the start of the 3rd millennium BCE and the military forays of the Akkadian kings near the end of the millennium provide a clear background for the millennium's events. The targets were the space-related sites by Gilgamesh to attain the god's longevity, by the kings beholden to Ishtar to attain supremacy. Without doubt, it was Marduk's Tower of Babel attempt that placed the control of the space-related sites at the center of the affairs of gods and men. And as we shall see, that centrality dominated much, if not most, of what took place later. The Akkadian phase of the War and Peace on Earth was not without celestial or Masonic aspects. In his chronicles, Sargon's titles followed the customary honorific Overseer of Ishtar, King of Kish, Great Ensi of Enlil, but he also called himself Anointed Priest of Anu. It was the first time that being divinely anointed, which is what Messiah literally means, appears in ancient inscriptions. Marduk in his pronouncements warned of a coming upheavals and cosmic phenomena. The day shall be turned into darkness, the flow of river water shall be disarrayed, the lands shall be laid to waste, the people will be made to perish. Looking back, recalling similar biblical prophecies, it is clear that on the eve of the 21st century BCE, gods and men expected a coming apocalyptic time. End of chapter 2, page 32. Next video will be chapter 3, Egyptian Prophecies, Human Destinies.